If you've ever stood beside a wind-blasted prairie in January, you know the kind of cold that steals thought before it steals breath. That's the scene most people picture when they hear this. Entire native families slept warmly through those nights inside fabric tipis, thin skins on poles, while many newcomers, sealed inside heavy log cabins, shivered and fell ill. It sounds backward until you stop thinking in terms of bulk and start thinking in terms of design. A teepee wasn't a tent so much as a winter engine, a compact machine that turned wood, air, and knowledge into comfort. It did not bully the weather, it outsmarted it. Begin with shape. Cabins present flat walls. The wind slams them, pressure builds, creaks turn to cracks, heat bleeds through joints. A teepee is all slope and curve. Gusts rise and spill around the cone rather than punching through it. That simple geometry keeps the covering from flapping and the structure from loosening. The same aerodynamic idea shows up today in storm-resistant roofs and tapered towers. Here it was executed in poles and hide, and the prairie's worst tantrums were turned into harmless airflow. Step inside and the logic deepens. The fire sits dead center, not off to one wall, because evenly radiated heat is worth more than a hot corner and a cold bed. The smoke hole at the peak and two adjustable exterior flaps are not decorations, they're a chimney you can tune. Someone watches the wind, angles the flaps so the leeward side opens and the windward side shelters, and the rising column of warm air carries smoke out without dragging precious heat with it. Cabins with low ceilings and small windows often poison themselves with trapped smoke or threw away heat with a clumsy draft. A well-run teepee breathed like a healthy lung, steady in, steady out, clean air without losing warmth. Now add the inner liner, the quiet genius most museum visitors miss. Think of it as a second skin hung from the poles, falling to shoulder height and stopping. Between outer cover and liner is a slender column of trapped air, the cheapest, most reliable insulation on Earth. Cold drafts that sneak under the outer edge drop behind the liner and slide out through discrete ground-level vents instead of crawling across sleeping faces. Warm air circulates above the liner where people live and breathe. To a carpenter, that's a double-wall system with controlled convection. To the families who perfected it, it was simply the way a home should be built. The ground is a different enemy. Frozen soil conducts heat away faster than you'd believe. The answer was layered from the earth up. A foundation of dry brush or willow mats to lift bodies off the dirt, thick thatch of grass or reeds to trap air, then wide hides fur side up to cup warmth under the sleeper. People didn't sprawl randomly. They nested in shallow bowls shaped into the bedding, because a curved depression keeps warm air from sliding away and keeps shoulders from bridging across hard points that steal heat. Children and elders were placed where the fire's influence lingered longest and where adult bodies could shield them from drafts. A family pattern that looks like tenderness but functions like a radiator array. A storm story from the northern plains captures what that meant in practice. An elder recalled a whiteout so fierce it erased the world from the doorway. Going 20 paces alone meant dying. Inside, a nephew tended the flaps, testing the pull of the smoke with a feather on a stick and shifting poles by inches until the plume climbed clean. A sister rotated stones from the fire bed into wrapped bundles for the sleeping children's feet, primitive heating pads that bled warmth slowly for hours. Another adult broke the night into quiet watches, feeding small dry pieces that burned hot and clean, never flooding the cone with sparks or damp smoke. By dawn, the world outside had drifted to the height of a horse's withers. Inside, breath rose in visible wisps, not frost, and the children woke complaining only that the stones had cooled. That is not luck. That is procedure. Fuel economy made this system unbeatable. A log cabin can eat a forest because its heat escapes through mass and bad airflow. You answer leaks with more logs. A teepee with a liner and tuned flaps wastes very little, so it needs very little. Smaller, hotter fires using dry, split wood cones or dung, which burn steady once dried, maintain comfort with a fraction of the fuel. That saved backs, saved time, and, over a winter, saved the local woods. When the wind swung around or the hunt moved, the entire house could be taken down, lashed to a travois, and re-raised in the lee of a new stand of trees within the hour. Mobility wasn't just a lifestyle choice, it was a thermal strategy. Why suffer where the wind eats you if you can simply pivot the cone and move to a smarter pocket of land? Food enters the story because warmth without strength is a short-lived victory. Winter kills by cold first and by scurvy and exhaustion soon after. Here the diet matched the shelter's elegance. Families rendered fat clear and mixed it with finely pounded dried meat and with dried vitamin-rich berries, then packed the mixture into rawhide or stomach bags. You know the name, pemmican, but most people don't appreciate the chemistry. Shelf-stable calories, protein and vitamin C packaged without oxygen so microbes can't work. A thumb of pemmican before sleep steadies blood sugar through the long cold and gives the body fuel to keep its furnace going. Preserves of mayhaw, cloudberry, and other fruits tucked into clay or bark containers offered small doses of bright acid all winter. They were desserts in form and medicine in function. While some newcomers gnawed salted pork and watched their gums bleed, these families considered how to make the cold season nourishing. Clothing followed the same layered logic as the walls. A soft hide next to the skin managed moisture. A lofty middle of fur trapped warm air. A tougher outer layer blocked wind. Hands and feet, first to lose heat, got special treatment. Dry grass or moss stuffed into moccasins to absorb damp. Fat rubbed on exposed skin and dusted with fine wood ash to create a windproof, slightly warming barrier. High wraps at the ankle to stop snow from sneaking down the boot. Nothing exotic, nothing wasteful. Just arrangements that put physics on your side. If you're picturing all this as frantic improvisation, invert the picture. The power of the teepee system lay in routine. Morning, a quiet check of flaps, bedding fluff to restore loft, embers roused without a blast of smoke. Midday, the skirt at the base rolled in or out depending on wind, rolled out to stop crawling drafts, lifted for summer ventilation. Evening, stones heated, wood sorted by dryness, liner shaken free of frost. Each act was small. Together they turned a thin wall into a thick defense. It's exactly how modern high-performance houses work. Lots of little margins won at the details. Even the layout of life inside the circle contributed. People sat with backs to the liner, absorbing radiant heat from fire and from the warmed inner skin. Tasks that made moisture, cooking, steaming, were kept balanced so the cover didn't glaze with frost. Damp gear dried in strata, hottest near the apex, gentler lower down so hide didn't harden and crack. Stories were told while hands worked. Knowledge traveled in the same current as heat. A visitor might remember smoke and songs. A resident remembered where to place a pot so the lid didn't drip into bedding. You can measure the wisdom 1,000 ways. Fewer logs consumed, fewer coughs in the night, fewer frost-nipped fingers. Or you can measure it in a simpler unit, the confidence to sleep. When children drift off under fur with warm stones at their feet and elders breathe easy and clean air, a shelter has done more than block weather. It has produced security. That security frees the next day's strength for hunting, for mending, for moving when game or wind patterns change. Comfort isn't softness here, it is stored energy for hard work. If this kind of practical, tested ingenuity fascinates you, stay with us as we unpack each component in depth. How the cones shed wind, how liners create a thermal jacket, how floor systems and stone batteries buy hours of warmth, and how food preserved in fat kept the body's fire burning. And while you're here, tap like and subscribe so these old but living skills don't vanish into museum glass. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what winter trick your grandparents swore by. Knowledge multiplies when it's shared, and this is the kind that still pays dividends when the power goes out and the wind comes up. Step past the threshold of a teepee on a midwinter night and the first thing you notice isn't the heat, it's the stillness. Outside, wind screams like an animal. Inside, there's a calm rhythm, the soft hiss of firewood and the quiet breathing of a family at rest. The air moves, but gently, swirling upward and outward as if following invisible blueprints. That movement wasn't accidental, it was engineered. The teepee functioned like a living organism, exhaling smoke and inhaling fresh air, recycling warmth without wasting a spark. The genius began with airflow. At the top, 2 triangular smoke flaps acted as adjustable lungs. They could be opened wide to vent a large fire or narrowed to trap heat when flames dimmed. Hunters and mothers alike knew exactly how to read the wind by its sound. A faint whistle through the flaps meant time to adjust. Too open and the heat would rush out, too tight and smoke would drop. Even children learned this language, helping to tilt the poles with long sticks until the plume of smoke rose in a clean spiral. Imagine controlling an entire home's climate with 2 poles and intuition. That's what they did every night, every storm. Behind those flaps, the secret lay in layers. The teepee wasn't one wall of hide, it was 2. The inner liner hung a hand's width inside the outer skin, creating a pocket of trapped air that worked as insulation. In the bitter cold, that small gap was the difference between freezing and comfort. Warm air pooled inside, while drafts slipped down the hidden corridor between the walls and escaped harmlessly through the vents near the ground. Even when snow buried the base of the structure, the airflow continued, nature's own central heating system, built with nothing more than hides, poles, and human understanding. The fire pit in the center was small but powerful. It didn't blaze like a bonfire, it glowed steady and blue-orange, feeding warmth to the entire circle. Families learned to burn smaller logs upright instead of flat, a method that focused heat upward toward the cone. This shape concentrated warmth where people sat and slept, rather than letting it vanish into corners. The flame's heart burned hotter, cleaner, and longer. The smoke, drawn by the cone's design, escaped smoothly through the top flaps without filling the space. To a modern eye, it was primitive. To an engineer, it was a masterpiece of convection. And then there was the floor. Frozen ground is a thief. It drinks warmth faster than any breeze. Native families understood this intimately. They built floors in layers, each serving a purpose. The base was woven mats of willow or reeds, flexible, breathable, and easy to move. On top came thick, dry grass to trap air, then hides with the fur side facing up. It wasn't decoration, it was insulation. These layers worked together like the soles of a boot, one stopping moisture, one trapping air, one radiating warmth. But the real brilliance was mobility. When the hunt moved, the entire structure moved with it. A family could dismantle a teepee in under an hour. The poles became a travois, the hides rolled into bundles, and within a short walk, the home rose again, facing the wind at a new angle. This wasn't just convenience, it was survival engineering. Mobility meant control over the environment. While settlers spent weeks building log cabins that trapped them in one place, native families followed warmth, game, and safety. They carried climate control on their backs. Inside the teepee, life revolved around the fire. Bedding formed a perfect circle around it, adults on the outside, children and elders closest to the glow. This wasn't just love, it was thermodynamics. Body heat radiated inward, bouncing off the liner and merging with the fire's warmth. Together, it created a microclimate so stable that even during whiteouts, the interior temperature could remain livable while the outside plunged far below freezing. Families didn't merely survive, they slept comfortably. Then came the silent allies, stones. Large, smooth rocks warmed in the fire were wrapped in hides and placed at the feet of sleeping children or under bedding. These heat batteries released warmth slowly through the night. Some families rotated them. While one set cooled, another was heating in the embers. This simple system provided continuous warmth without wasting wood or keeping a large fire burning. Think of it as the original overnight heater, powered by stone, gravity, and experience. Even daily chores were designed around efficiency. Firewood was sorted, dry branches burned for heat, damp wood used for smoke when curing meat. The liner was checked each morning. If frost had formed, it was shaken off before melting, keeping the hides dry. The skirts at the base of the teepee were rolled in or out depending on the weather. Every small act, adjusting flaps, rotating stones, tending embers, was part of an unspoken science passed down through generations. No written manuals, no tools with gauges, just observation and memory. Let's talk about the diet because warmth begins inside the body. A fire could heat the air, but food fueled the blood. Native families had no citrus fruit, yet they rarely suffered from scurvy. Their answer was brilliant. Preserved berries like cloudberry, mayhaw, and pawpaw, all naturally rich in vitamin C. These were dried into cakes or mashed and sealed in clay jars, sometimes mixed with honey or fat to last all winter. The result was sweet, nutritious, and, unknowingly, a medicine that protected them from disease. The centerpiece of their diet, however, was pemmican. It wasn't glamorous, but it was genius. Imagine taking thin strips of lean meat, drying them until brittle, then pounding them into a fine powder. Add melted fat, sometimes a handful of dried berries, and pack it all into rawhide bags. The mixture hardened into a dense, nutrient-packed block that could last for years without spoiling. A single handful carried enough energy to sustain a hunter for an entire day. When settlers later encountered pemmican, they couldn't believe something so simple could be so effective. They adopted it for fur trading expeditions that stretched thousands of miles, proof of native innovation spreading across continents. In this harmony of shelter and sustenance, everything served everything else. The teepee preserved heat, pemmican preserved strength. The airflow saved fuel, dried fruits saved health. No single invention existed in isolation. Each supported the other like branches in the same frame. Together they formed a self-sustaining cycle of warmth, nourishment, and balance. Here's the part modern science still struggles to match: efficiency through simplicity. The teepee didn't need wires, chimneys, or insulation foam. It used shape, air, and rhythm. It responded to nature instead of resisting it. In every detail, from the flick of a flap to the layering of grass, it reflected a worldview, that survival wasn't about domination but cooperation. If this way of thinking fascinates you, stick with me for the next part. We'll uncover how every tool inside the teepee, from firestones to fur layers, from flap poles to floor mats, turned physics into daily ritual. And if you're enjoying this rediscovery of real ingenuity, give this story a like, share it with someone who loves old wisdom, and subscribe. Because the next time the power goes out, the people who remember this knowledge won't be the ones shivering. When we think of survival, we often imagine frantic motion, chopping wood, rushing to build shelter, scrambling for food before the storm hits. But for Native families, survival wasn't chaos. It was order. Every movement had rhythm, every gesture a purpose refined over centuries. The teepee was their masterpiece, but it worked only because people knew how to live inside it. It began with the setup. Records and oral stories tell that a family could pack, move, and rebuild an entire teepee in under an hour. The first 3 poles formed a tripod, bound together with rawhide rope, creating the skeleton of the structure. Then came more poles, leaned evenly to form a perfect cone, tied high at the apex. Hides were wrapped around, pinned with wooden pegs, and the entrance aligned east toward the sunrise, both symbolic and practical, allowing morning light to dry dew and chase away cold air. The final touch was the ground skirt. The lower edge of the hide was rolled outward, forming a lip that stopped wind from crawling inside and stealing warmth. But the genius didn't stop at construction. Inside, life unfolded according to principles as exact as any scientific method. The fire pit was always centered, a low, circular bed surrounded by smooth stones that absorbed heat and prevented sparks from jumping into bedding. At night, adults took turns as fire tenders. They didn't just throw wood into flames, they tuned the fire. Too high and it wasted fuel. Too low and the family would wake chilled. Each log was chosen for its burn speed, dry pine for a quick flare, dense hardwood for slow endurance. The tenders adjusted the flames like modern people adjust a thermostat, guided only by the whisper of heat and the pull of smoke. Smoke flap management was a skill in itself. As winds shifted, someone would reach for a long pole resting by the doorway and nudge the upper flaps. In strong wind, they closed the windward side and cracked the leeward, using the breeze itself to draw out smoke. During calm weather, both flaps opened wide, letting fresh air in. A well-tuned teepee could stay warm and clear all night without suffocating the fire or the family. When settlers visited and marveled at the lack of smoke, they called it magic. It wasn't magic, it was mastery. The sleeping arrangement followed the same balance of practicality and compassion. Bedding formed a perfect ring around the central fire. Elders and children slept closest to the warmth, adults on the outer layer, forming both a wall of protection and a living thermal system. Each body added to the shared heat, and the fur coverings trapped it like a dome. Studies by modern researchers who've reconstructed these sleeping patterns show that temperatures inside stayed stable even during sub-zero nights, while humidity remained comfortable. The science of comfort was woven directly into family structure. Then came stone heat management. Before bedtime, smooth river rocks were placed directly in the fire until they glowed faintly red. Once heated, they were pulled out with antler tongs wrapped in thick hides and placed strategically around the floor, near bedding, at the feet, or under resting animals. These night stones radiated gentle warmth for hours, long after the main fire dimmed. At dawn, cold stones were swapped for new ones, continuing the cycle. No modern heater could match the quiet reliability of this stone relay. It kept the fire small, fuel use low, and the air breathable. Clothing mirrored the same logic. Layers were everything. The first layer was soft leather, absorbing sweat and keeping skin dry. Over that came furs turned inward, trapping body heat. The outermost hides, sometimes smoked or greased with fat, blocked wind and shed snow. Even boots were engineered marvels. Moccasins were stuffed with dry moss or grass that could be replaced as soon as it grew damp, an organic, renewable insulation system. Hunters heading out into snow rubbed animal fat on their leggings and boots, sealing seams just like waterproof wax. The more they walked, the warmer they stayed. The motion circulated heat like a living pump. And then there was food, the second half of warmth. During the day, someone always tended to the stores. Pemmican bags, dried fruits, nuts, and herbs. Nothing was wasted. Animal fat became candles, waterproofing, and cooking grease. Bones were boiled into broth, then ground for tools or needles. Even ashes from the fire found use, mixed with water and maize to create nixtamal, unlocking nutrients in corn and preventing disease. What settlers saw as primitive camp cooking was, in fact, sophisticated chemistry. Let's look at how timing tied everything together. Families followed the rhythm of the land, not a clock. Before dawn, a quiet stirring. The fire tender added small twigs, testing the coals. By sunrise, the smoke flaps opened slightly, letting light in. Morning meals were simple. Broth thickened with cornmeal or slices of pemmican melted into stews. Children were sent to gather kindling or brush snow off the hides. At midday, flaps lifted higher to ventilate heat and smoke. Evenings were for maintenance. Flaps adjusted, stones rotated, hides repaired, and stories told while hands worked. Each motion maintained both the shelter and the family's bond. That's the part modern people miss. Routine was technology. The teepee worked because it was lived correctly. It wasn't the materials alone but the behavior surrounding them that created warmth and safety. A liner hung too loose, a flap left untended, or a fire burned too large could undo the system. So, survival depended not on strength but on attention, cooperation, and rhythm. Even beyond warmth, these practices shaped character. Children grew up watching adults balance the elements: smoke, air, flame, and wind. They learned patience from the slow heating of stones, discipline from rationing wood, and respect from thanking the fire each morning before rekindling it. Every practical act carried a whisper of ceremony. You didn't command nature, you collaborated with it. And in this cooperation lay community. The teepee wasn't one person's home, it was a circle where roles intertwined. The builder relied on the fire tender, the hunter on the food keeper, the children on the elders' stories that encoded generations of weather lore. Survival wasn't isolation, it was orchestra. Now, imagine a night when snow piled high, and the world outside howled white. Inside, one adult adjusted the flaps, another rotated the stones, children carried dry grass, elders murmured tales of past storms. There was no fear, only motion, purpose, and trust. The teepee glowed from within, like a heartbeat against the endless cold. That glow wasn't just firelight. It was knowledge in action. Physics, nutrition, architecture, and compassion working together. Centuries before sustainable living became a phrase, native families embodied it, night after night, storm after storm. If this quiet brilliance resonates with you, show it some love. Hit like, leave a comment sharing where you're watching from, and subscribe so we can keep exploring how ancient wisdom solved problems we still face today. Because sometimes the smartest way forward is the one our ancestors already walked, one careful, practiced step at a time. When you put all the pieces together, the teepee's shape, the fire's balance, the food, the rhythm, something extraordinary emerges. This wasn't mere survival. It was stability. A system so complete that it met every need: heat, food, community, and spirit, with nothing wasted. And the proof isn't in legend. It's in the results that baffled settlers and impressed explorers for centuries. Let's start with the most obvious one: fuel. European settlers burned through mountains of wood trying to heat their thick log cabins. A single family might consume wagon loads in a single winter. Yet, despite the effort, the cold seeped in through cracks and smoke lingered like a curse. Meanwhile, native families used less than 1/10 the amount of wood and stayed warmer. The secret wasn't brute force, it was efficiency. The teepee didn't trap heat like a box. It circulated it, guided by airflow instead of sheer mass. Fire, stone, and hide worked together like gears in a clock. That efficiency meant freedom. Where settlers spent half the winter chopping and hauling wood just to keep alive, native families used that time for hunting, crafting, teaching, and storytelling. Less labor, more life. In a landscape where time and energy meant survival, that difference was huge. The teepee turned the harshest environment in North America into a livable home, portable, adaptable, and kind to the land. Now consider health. Winter disease struck European settlements hard: scurvy, frostbite, lung infections. Families trapped indoors with poor ventilation and little fresh food fell sick fast. In contrast, native families, living in constant exchange with fresh air, rarely suffered from suffocation or smoke poisoning. Their diets, packed with dried fruits, pemmican, and preserved herbs, supplied natural vitamins that kept their immune system strong. What modern medicine calls preventive nutrition was already built into their way of life. And then there's comfort. Archaeological studies of traditional winter camps reveal that interior teepee temperatures often stayed stable even when the outside dropped far below freezing. Bedding layers, body heat, and radiant firelight maintained a livable zone in the center of the space. Not luxury but comfort. Enough warmth for sleep, enough air for lungs, enough safety for children to dream. That comfort wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Inside the teepee, light flickered off poles and shadows danced on hides. Elders told stories that bound the young to their ancestors. Children drifted to sleep to the sound of fire crackling and wind whispering outside. The circle itself, people gathered together around the heart of the home, built connections stronger than any wall. In a world of isolation, this warmth of community was perhaps their greatest insulation. Then there's the land. Cabins required cutting trees, digging foundations, reshaping the earth to make it serve the structure. Tipis required almost nothing. A few poles, hides, and the knowledge of how to place them with the wind. When a family moved on, the land remained untouched, ready to heal. No stumps, no waste, no scars. In modern terms, it was the ultimate low-impact design. Sustainability wasn't a theory. It was instinct. They didn't think in seasons, they thought in generations. Mobility also meant resilience. When herds shifted, tribes followed. When storms destroyed forests or rivers flooded, they didn't fight nature, they moved with it. Their homes were as fluid as the world they lived in. While settlers built fortresses that sometimes trapped them in disaster, native families built freedom into their walls. A teepee could fall and rise again in a single day, proof that flexibility beats rigidity every time. And here's the unexpected truth. The teepee wasn't just a home, it was a teacher. Every generation learned science without textbooks. How airflow works, how insulation traps heat, how fire consumes oxygen, how bodies share warmth. Each storm became a lesson. Each repair a chance to refine design. That's how knowledge survived. Not written on paper but lived in motion, repeated thousands of times until it became instinct. Settlers sometimes mocked what they didn't understand, calling the teepee primitive. Yet centuries later, engineers studying sustainable housing would arrive at the same principles. Natural ventilation, passive heating, lightweight renewable materials, and thermal layering. In the end, the so-called primitive design turned out to be ahead of its time. What modern science calls innovation, the ancestors simply called wisdom. The ripple effect of that wisdom continues even now. Architects design cone-shaped shelters for disaster zones because they shed wind efficiently. Survival experts teach stone heating techniques once used in teepees. Nutritionists praise pemmican as the original superfood. What was once dismissed as old-fashioned has become the model for resilience in an uncertain future. But beyond physics and food, the teepee carried something deeper, a philosophy. It taught that every element of life connects to every other. Fire depends on air. Shelter depends on the land. The land depends on respect. Families lived with that understanding woven into every decision, from how to angle a flap to when to harvest berries. The result was a civilization tuned to balance rather than control. And that's what made survival not just possible, but sustainable. Now pause and look at the contrast. While settlers wrote manuals on how to conquer nature, native families lived by lessons on how to coexist with it. They didn't build walls to block the wind, they shaped their homes to dance with it. They didn't store endless stockpiles, they created food that lasted naturally. They didn't force the earth to yield, they listened until it offered. This wasn't weakness. It was intelligence sharpened by centuries of storms. So, what can we take from this today? In a world of climate change, energy waste, and overconsumption, the teepee still speaks, quietly but clearly. It says that true survival isn't about more, it's about enough. Enough warmth without waste, enough food without greed, enough shelter without destruction. Knowledge, not power, is what keeps a family alive through winter. And maybe that's the message worth remembering. Outside, the wind still howls. The storms haven't stopped, they've just changed shape. But the fire at the heart of a teepee still burns in the idea that humanity's smartest path forward is the one that works with the earth, not against it. So, as you sit by your own fire tonight, think of that circle on the plains. The smoke curling upward, the snow drifting outside, the quiet hum of life enduring. And if this story reminded you of how much brilliance lies in the old ways, hit that like button, share it with someone who values forgotten knowledge, and subscribe. Because these aren't just stories about the past, they're blueprints for the future. The teepee wasn't built to last forever. But the wisdom inside it? That's what endures.